Kính chào quý vị khán giả đang đến với chương trình Văn hóa và những người bạn của Đài Truyền hình Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh. Sau số đầu tiên giới thiệu về ngày Tết truyền thống của người Hàn Quốc vốn có những nét tương đồng với Việt Nam, thì số thứ hai hôm nay chúng ta sẽ đến với một đất nước nằm ở phía Tây bán cầu để tìm hiểu một vài nét văn hóa mà hoàn toàn khác biệt với Việt Nam trong cách tổ chức lễ hội truyền thống.
Scotland là một quốc gia tại Tây Âu thuộc Vương quốc Liên hiệp Anh, cùng với Anh, xứ Wales và Bắc Ireland. Với sự độc lập nhất định về pháp luật, hệ thống giáo dục và giáo hội, Scotland vẫn gìn giữ được văn hóa và nét đặc trưng của dân tộc. Cũng như những quốc gia khác ở châu Âu, Scotland tạo được nhiều sức hút cho khách tham quan từ nét cổ kính của những tòa tháp, lâu đài từ xa xưa và những góc phố nhỏ với những con người thanh nhàn. Tuy nhiên, yếu tố để làm nên tính độc nhất cho vùng đất này là những phong tục tập quán và nghệ thuật dân gian. Nếu bạn muốn nhìn thấy tất cả những nét đẹp đó thì hãy đến với một lễ hội truyền thống bất kỳ của người Scotland. Ở đây, bạn sẽ gặp được những con người vui tính với nhiều tình yêu sâu sắc đối với văn hóa dân tộc. Và tất nhiên, họ luôn sẵn sàng dành thời gian để kể cho bạn những điều mà bạn muốn biết về Scotland.
Thưa quý vị, khi nói đến văn hóa truyền thống của Scotland thì chúng ta thường biết đến không chỉ những chiếc kèn túi, những chiếc váy dành cho đàn ông, mà còn bị ấn tượng bởi những lễ hội truyền thống rất đặc trưng của nước này. Và trong khi người Việt Nam chúng ta đang háo hức chuẩn bị đón Tết, thì ở Scotland cũng đã có một lễ hội có tên gọi là Đêm của Burns, vừa diễn ra vào ngày 25 tháng 1 vừa qua. Đêm của Burns là ngày kỷ niệm ngày sinh của Robert Burns, tác giả của nhiều bài thơ bằng ngôn ngữ truyền thống của Scotland. Trong lễ hội này, mọi người ca hát, nhảy múa, tiến hành những nghi thức, chế biến những món ăn. Và để tìm hiểu rõ hơn về lễ hội này, hôm nay chúng tôi có mời đến phim trường một nhân vật mà tôi nghĩ là sẽ đem đến cho quý vị rất nhiều điều lý thú. Trong anh vừa tồn tại niềm đam mê đối với cuộc sống năng động hiện đại, vừa ẩn chứa tình yêu dành cho những giá trị văn hóa truyền thống.
What does your sister do? Dominoes.
Yeah.
Okay? What do you call this stuff? Một bánh mì ốp lá.
Hello, Callum Nicholson.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. I can see from the video clip that you are not only an interesting teacher, but also a passionate rocker, right?
Oh yes, I am.
Okay, but you are here today to tell us about Burns Night,
Uh-huh.
a Scottish festival, right?
Yes, I am.
So, just forget about rock, okay?
I'll try. I'll try. It's very difficult, but okay.
Okay, to begin with, let's talk about Robert Burns, whose life and work is celebrated on January the 25th.
That's right.
And why is he still celebrated 200 years after his death?
Well, I think the first reason is that he is a great writer. He's the bard of Scotland. That's what we call him. Bard is like a poet. And Robert Burns's work told the truth about the daily lives and struggles of ordinary working class Scottish people. And he also wrote some beautiful romantic love songs and love poetry as well. And he, most importantly, he wrote in the dialect of ordinary Scottish people. And he was from the southwest of Scotland. And the language that he wrote in we call Lowland Scots.
Oh, yeah.
So the lowlands between Edinburgh and Glasgow in the south of Scotland. And it still resonates with readers and audiences today because the topics and themes that he talked about are universal, and issues of love and struggle with money and man's position in society, these are all things that affect us today. So I think that's the reason why, as modern Scottish people, we still celebrate the life and work of Robert Burns.
Could you give us an example of his poem?
Well, one that you may already know is he wrote the words to the Auld Lang Syne. Now, you might know the tune. It goes da 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 da.
I know that song.
So the words to this song were written by Robert Burns, and Auld Lang Syne remembers our friends in the past who maybe over the years we have become separated from. And in Scotland, as the year changes from the 31st of December to the 1st of January, the first thing we do in Scotland after the bells have struck midnight is we gather in a big circle and hold arms, and we sing Auld Lang Syne to remember friends from the past as we look forward to the new year.
You said that Robert Burns' poems were written in Lowland Scots.
Yes.
And that's why I can't understand the words in the Auld Lang Syne.
It
was just written Lowland Scots.
Yes, Lowland Scots was the language or dialect of the people in the south of Scotland. And it's similar to English, but a lot of the vocabulary is different. It's heavily influenced by the languages of Scandinavia. When the Vikings invaded Britain in 791, they brought a lot of their language with them. And it still carries forward today in the language of Scottish people. For example, many Scottish people use the word bairn for baby, and that's exactly the same word in modern Danish today. So there's a strong link between Lowland Scots and the languages of Scandinavia.
What about Gaelic?
Well,
it's also a traditional language of Scotland, right?
It is. Gaelic is we say it's the indigenous language of Scotland. Lowland Scots was influenced by English and the Vikings. But the Gaelic language came to Scotland from Ireland about 1,000 years ago. And in the north of Scotland today, we have a lot of bilingual people who use Gaelic in everyday communication. I worked with one man in Glasgow when I was a student, and he was from the Highlands of Scotland. And his mother could not actually speak English. She only communicated in Gaelic.
Okay.
But in the 19th century, the English landowners and invaders maybe made it illegal for Scottish people to speak Gaelic.
Yeah.
So the language went into decline. But in recent years, there has been a strong movement to revitalise the language. So there's been a lot of work in education for children to be educated in Gaelic, and there is evidence that children who are educated in Gaelic and not English achieve higher grades at school than children who are educated in English. And some friends of mine at home in Scotland, they have young children and they speak to them in English and Gaelic. So the future looks quite bright for our language.
That's interesting. Did you speak any Gaelic?
I do speak some Gaelic. I don't know if you want a whole lesson here, but some essential Gaelic. Good afternoon is Fesca Ma.
Pescama.
Thank you is Moran Tang.
Modern Tang.
Moran Tang.
Modern Tang.
And how are you is Kumrahau,
Kumrahau.
which I always think is a little bit like Huehong. So I think
It sounds like Northern European
well,
languages.
it's very different from English, and it's different from other European languages that have a Latin base. And the reason for this is quite simple. When the Roman Empire conquered Europe and North Africa, but when they tried to move more north to occupy Scotland, they couldn't beat the Scottish warriors.
Oh.
So rather than try to invade Scotland, the Romans, decided to build a wall at the border between Scotland and England to keep the Scots out. So for that reason, the language was allowed to develop without the influence of Latin from the Romans. So it is a completely different language from other European languages.
Now let's go back to Burns Night. Could you tell us a little bit about how the festival is celebrated?
Certainly. Burns Night is the one event in the year where Scottish people, will wear a kilt and eat our national food of haggis. And do our traditional Scottish dancing. It's a real celebration of traditional Scottish culture, and it always follows a regular format. And what it starts with is everyone will sit around a big long table. There could be 200 people in the room.
200 people?
Oh yes, it's a big party. And the haggis is brought in, it is led by a bagpiper.
Mm-hmm.
And the bagpipes is the very noisy Scottish instrument. It looks like an octopus under your arm.
Okay.
So a piper will lead the haggis into the dining room, and it will be carried on a tray.
Mm-hmm.
The haggis will be set at the head of the table, and then somebody, the big honour of the evening, is to address the haggis. And in the addressing of the haggis, we read a poem which was written by Robert Burns to celebrate our national food. And we address the haggis, and then the gentlemen in the room raise their glasses and they give a toast to the lassies, the ladies. And this has changed over the years, and it's become quite humorous, where the men might apologise for going out drinking late at night during the year, and then it's returned where the lassies reply to the men. And then they generally complain about how the men have treated them throughout the year.
Are they serious? Are they serious?
No, it's a very good-natured, humorous occasion. It's not a serious argument. It's part of the Scottish culture. A little bit confrontational, but with good humour. And so the lassies reply to the men, and then we all raise our glasses, drink some whiskey, and then we have what we call a ceilidh. And a ceilidh is the party with traditional Scottish dancing. And this is very energetic, fast dancing. Now, the dances are quite complicated.
Can you do it now?
I would love to demonstrate some Scottish dancing now, but the point about Scottish dancing is it's a group.
Okay.
It's a group activity. So when you have 150, 200 people in a room together, and everybody knows the correct steps to the dance, and the dance is able to flow around the room, it's a great feeling of everyone together. And with the loud, fast music and lots of whiskey, it's great fun. And if anyone visits Scotland, I do recommend that if you can go to a ceilidh, you would love it.
What about the kilt, which is very traditional, very common,
Yes.
famous in Scotland?
Yes, a lot of people know about the kilt, and the men in Scotland wear a skirt. The kilt now is for show. It's not, we don't wear it regularly like ao dai in Vietnam.
Okay.
We would wear it at weddings, at New Year, and particularly at Burns Night. And the kilt now, I have one here to show you.
Okay.
Now, I like to tell people it's not a skirt, but
It looks
As you
like
can
a
see,
skirt.
it's a skirt. Okay. And we wrap it round. It must be just above the knee. That's the
Okay.
correct length. And what people don't know is that the correct way for a man to wear a kilt is not to wear any underwear. Now, I'm not sure where this tradition came from, but
Okay.
it's very popular with the men and women.
Really?
Now, I do have my kilt here in Vietnam, but driving a motorbike and with all the mosquitoes, I don't wear it very often. But that's just the skirt. But in the past, the farmers working the land in the mountains, the kilt would be a much, much bigger, heavy piece of wool.
Okay.
So it would wrap round the waist and then come over the shoulder and round here. So in the cold evenings, you would just pull the kilt over your head and you are covered in wool. So it was your home and your clothes.
You also said during the party you eat the haggis.
Yes.
I am impressed with this. And can you tell us a little bit about the haggis?
Sure.
How is it made?
Well, the haggis is made from a sheep's intestines. All the bits that you don't really like to eat of an animal.
Okay.
We call this offal. It's not awful, it's offal. Okay? And in the past, when the Scottish farmers were working the land for the richer landowners, when they killed the sheep, the rich landowners would take the best pieces of meat. And as is the same around the world, you know, the poorer farmers, they would be given the not so tasty parts, and also the intestines can go off very quickly. So the Scottish farmers, they had to find a way to make a meal from this quite horrible part of an animal. So we mix it with oatmeal. We chop up all the intestines and we mix it with oatmeal, which is the Scottish equivalent of rice, maybe. And we put some salt and pepper. And we mix it into a paste. And then we put it inside the sheep's stomach. It's actually the stomach from the sheep. And we tie it at both ends. So it's like a round ball tied. And then we boil that. And it is traditionally served with potatoes and turnip. Now these are very, very cheap, common vegetables. It's not a very elegant food, but it is the food that kept the poor Scottish people alive during the winter.
That sounds interesting. I definitely want to try it if I have a chance.
You should, and I would strongly recommend vegetarian haggis, because
Well.
there is no need to eat the sheep's stomach now,
Okay.
and many people say it's tastier.
How about the poem before you eat the haggis? Address a haggis, right?
Yep, addressed to the haggis. Now, this should be done by memory. If you're having a Burns night, you have to do it from memory. I'll try and do the first line, or the first verse for you. It goes, "Fair fa your honest sonsie face, great chieftain of the Pudden race, aboon them all ye tak your place." Da 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 da. Okay. So, and the poem talks about the beauty of the haggis, the smell, the taste. And anyone who can speak English, you'll recognise that some of the words are quite different. Fair fa your honest sonsie face, great chieftain of the Pudden race, aboon them all ye tak your place, painch tripe or thairm. We'll are you worthy of a grace, as lang's my airm. Now there are another 6 verses, but the ending is my favourite part. And it says, so if you want to impress a lassie, gie her a haggis. Just give her a haggis. You power wha mak mankind your care, and dish them out your bill of fare. Old Scots once nae sinking ware that joups in luggies. But if you wish her grateful prayer, gie her a haggis.
Speaking of the party, I am sure that you have whiskies during the party, right? Whiskey is very
Yes. Yes.
famous in Scotland.
Yes, it is. It again, men in skirts and whiskey. That's what people know about Scotland. Whiskey, or in Gaelic, as we call it, Uiscava, which means the water of life. Whiskey, very popular drink, very famously produced in Scotland. And similar to wine in France, we have different regions that produce different types of whiskey. I don't actually like whiskey myself, I must admit. But one thing for people interested in drinking whiskey is that you know if a bottle of whiskey comes from Scotland if it is spelt W-H-I-S-K-Y without an E between the K and the Y. Only Scottish whiskey can be spelt K-Y at the end. So if it's W-H-I-S-K-E-Y, it could be Irish, could be American, Japanese,
okay.
anything, but not Scottish.
Yeah.
So if anybody tries to sell you Scotch and you see an E in whiskey,
And
you know that
that's
it's not
true.
real.
Okay. Besides telling the Scot whiskey by the words on the bottle, how else do we know it from other whiskies? For example, can you tell which one is from Scotland among various glasses of whiskey?
Well, you can't tell if a whiskey is from Scotland by the taste, but you can tell what region of Scotland a whiskey has come from. For example, Highland malts have a different character from Islay malts. Islay is in the northwest of Scotland. And some whiskies have a smoky flavour, some whiskies have a peaty flavour, and peat is like the soil. So it's not that you can tell a Scotch whiskey, it's about the regions within Scotland that we get the different flavours of whiskey.
We are absolutely amazed by your